last few quarters, we have seen the usual pillar of growth, which is consumption, also having reacted adversely to the past downtrend in investment cycle, and the shrinking scope of further fiscal stimulus, which would keep the consumption ticking strong. So last few quarters, in fact, we have seen significant correction in consumption. As a result, the first half, we are likely to see a growth of somewhere close to 4.5. Important issue is how do we see it going forward? I think between the two drivers of growth, traditionally India has always been a consumption-driven story with 1.2 billion people, but the time when we saw India's growth coming close to 9% on an average was essentially also driven by a very strong investment cycle that India witnessed between 2004-2008. However, post-Lehman, we really haven't seen any meaningful recovery in investment cycle, and as a result, India's growth potential has been decelerating over the last couple of years. Very important that we need to see a strong recovery in this growth of investments, which unfortunately may have to wait out until maybe 2 quarters or so, but we are seeing incipient signs of recovery there. The government has been taking active steps to debottleneck some of the projects which had seen various issues on mining, on land acquisition, etc., causing those projects from progressing any further. So going forward in the second half, we probably could see growth across the 5% mark, and for the full year we could see a 5% growth. Consumption is likely to get a very strong backing from the rural economy, as agriculture is expected to perform extremely well thanks to the supernormal monsoons that we had this year. So I think if I were to look at 2 key drivers of growth in this fiscal year going into the next 2 quarters, it would be a bounce back in consumption story for India, which over the last quarters had seen some deceleration. And another factor that we see as providing adequate support to growth is a resumption in our export story. Let's not forget India's currency has seen a depreciating trend, not just in the last few months or last 1 year, but over the last 2 years. As a result, India's exports have become more attractive, with small recovery in the global demand conditions, particularly led by US. I think exports is one area where we see a strong support coming from. So to answer and summarize your question, where do we see growth coming from? Essentially rural consumption, exports, and probably some recovery in the investment cycle at a slow pace though. So we could see a 5% growth as a whole for the current fiscal year. Going forward, I think the steps that the government has been taking on the addressing most critical impediments on various projects spanning from infrastructure to other facilities, I think that is going to be critical in helping investment recovery. So probably the next year would become even more important to monitor the recovery in the investment cycle. Consumption, as I said, is and always has been the growth support, which we expect to get back on its track over the next 2 or 3 quarters.